Hey, Simon, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Well, thanks for inviting me to participate. So Simon Hunt, 25 plus years in cybersecurity now as a technologist, as a product leader, as a GM, friend of sales, I would say, failed marine biologist, obviously British, but living in America. Somehow through fortitude ended up in Marco Island with my wife here down in Florida, but always high-tech cybersecurity sales and driven basically to stop cyber criminals from getting rich. That's my purpose in life, to
Cool.
save us from the cyber criminals.
So you've had to deal with the notorious sales team occasionally?
Yeah, so my whole career has been supporting sales. I started off as a product manager, as a developer, so building things, and very early on in my career, learned that the salespeople motivation isn't my motivation. My motivation was, leave me alone, let me invent cool stuff. And then the sales guys would be out with customers and they would say, the customer says the button has to be blue. If you don't make the button blue, we won't get the deal and it'll all be your fault. And my kids won't get to go to college. And like thrown into that high pressure sales and learning that the sales teams out and the field sales teams, they have this motivation of meet quota. That's their life, or they don't get paid. Their kids literally don't go to college. And if you don't treat them well, they will do anything they can to make their life happen. And they do care about everybody else, but their objective is very simple to qualify, make quota. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, and you can either get on board with that and help them, or you can suffer the consequences of terrible discounting behavior, inventing features, like disappointing customers, and just it can be horrible, but it also can be beautiful.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
learn that very early on.
well, let's focus on the beauty. So,
Yes, please.
how, how should sales work with folks like you to make it more effective, I guess?
Yeah, so the cybersecurity space is so interesting because in the last 20, 30 years, we've gone from selling fear to selling value. So to work for salespeople and technologists to work together in the cybersecurity world, the technologists have to help the sales guy understand the value, because you can't just go into every customer and say, if you don't buy my product, your cyber criminals will eat you alive and you'll go out of business. People are just that's the
That's
fear. People hear that all the time, and it's like
right. It's
another guy selling fear. So the job of the product team, the chief technology officer, is to help that salesperson with beautiful messages like, if you partner with me, life will be so much better. You will be heroic. Your business will be stable. Not fear, but delight. Yeah, delight. I can make your business better, and hopefully with some numbers and metrics and qualifications. But to help the sales team with the stories, the anecdotes about how great the world could be. I had the privilege to work with Stan Slap. I'm sure you know that group, the Slap group, and he talked about the bitter place, the better place, than journey. Explain to people how terrible things are now, not how terrible you are, but how terrible things are, how great and amazing they could be, and the journey between the two. And inviting the customer, like, join me on this journey. I'm not selling to you. I'm inviting you to participate in this amazing experience that we could have together. Um, the challenge is that few companies arm their sales guys with sufficient like content in that voice. Yeah,
yeah.
they just say, here's the technical feeds and speeds, off you go. That's not helpful. Yeah.
And it's not what the client cares about.
No, this doesn't help. I mean, you talk about understanding, like listen and understand. That doesn't help. Like spewing out our stuff is faster, better, cheaper, isn't helping you understand the need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you get engaged with the salespeople, with the customers? I'm sure you did in certain deals.
Yeah, I've always been out in the field. So many road trips with sales in minivans driving across the country, flying to I had the privilege of working in 69 countries. Can you believe it? So always out with the sales guy, um, learning that when a field guy says, "Hey, I'll invite my CTO to come and see you," there's an expectation, and all of a sudden the credibility of that guy comes up. He's a man who can get me people. He can give me access to expertise and talent. Um, Understanding how precious that is, and turning up with your A game, so the sales guy can say, look, I brought you this amazing person to help with our understanding. Not turning up like after drinking the night before, or jet lagged or whatever. Like remembering that impression that sales guys put their reputation and their credibility on the line. So yeah, spent many times, have been thrown out of companies, brokered deals, saved relationships, and always with that thought, like how do I improve the relationship between the customer and the salesperson? How do I improve their credibility, even if that customer doesn't buy from us? When that person goes to a different company, they'll remember the sales guy. They'll remember, hey, he made things happen. He got me access to talent and information. And hopefully there's a call back, like, can you help me now? Just building that long relationship.
And what did you notice about the best salespeople that you happen to work with versus the average?
So some of the best sales people I've worked with knew very little about my products. Like they knew very little about the technology, but they were amazing quarterbacks. They knew how to wrangle the right team for the customer, and also when, not just on day one, let me get my CEO, my CTO, my product manager, like how to use it strategically and target and make it valuable, like not easy for the customer, but value. So the best were always asking questions, trying to understand the pain of the customer, and then saying things like, well, there's a whole range of products you could choose from. They're all great products. These are all great companies. But I have this feeling that my solution is just a better fit for you. That my company is just a little better aligned with you. I'll tell you a story about an amazing salesperson. I bought a company. I was with MasterCard a couple of years ago, and I bought a company from MasterCard. And the day we closed the deal, which is the day the salesperson knew MasterCard was buying the company, the sales guy reached out to me and said, tell me some stories about MasterCard. I said, well, we don't really have any about your domain because that's why we're buying your company. We don't do. He said, no, about MasterCard in general. I want to be able to go to a customer and tell stories about MasterCard to differentiate me from everybody else in my industry. So he was selling cyber risk quantification, and I was telling him about how MasterCard gives refugees credit cards so they can shop in the local stores and things, and all these crazy, like MasterCard sponsors the rugby, and we have an esports division. And this guy was then able to parrot these anecdotes, and customers found him more interesting. Like, well, actually, their product may not be any better, but I want to be part of MasterCard. I want to be in that journey.
Yeah.
That's an example of an amazing salesperson thinking, how do I differentiate myself without it being discounting or feeds and speeds? Like, how do I just say, partnering with me is going to be a more interesting journey for you, Mr. Customer. Like, I am the better person for you to do business with. And there's a few people like that who some knew a lot about the technology, but knew when not to say anything, knew when to say, let me bring in an expert to get a second call. All of them told stories about how being part of doing business with me is going to be so delightful for us together. Yeah. That's what differentiated themselves. And the worst went in with, we're cheaper, we're faster, we have a technical differentiator. Those are the worst, because it all came down to a spreadsheet then, and there was no ability for them to bring their personality and their story to the equation.
Well, that's it, because they go through the enablement training at the company that's typically given by marketing, who's never met a customer. But they sit in the meetings all day with the product manager, and this is what we do. This is what we do better. They do a market study, go to their website and compare. Now, help me, because I deal with a lot of security salespeople. What do CISOs and the security team, what are they looking for?
Well, put yourself in the position of a CISO. He knows there's going to be problems in the future. It's inevitable, and wants to come out of it heroic. So that's the motivation. And I'm dramatically oversimplifying it. But if I can go to a CISO and say, when bad stuff happens, I'll make you look like a hero, I've got his attention. Like, not feeds and speeds, because then he's saying, well, does this feed and speed make me heroic? I need to start with, I will save your butt. Like, when bad stuff happens, people will look to you and say, you did everything possible to eliminate this risk. that's how I start. I start by talking to the CISO, and I help the salespeople and marketing talk to the CISO and say, where do you feel vulnerable? Where do you feel that you're not able to do the best job you can for your company? And sometimes CISOs will say, well, I don't have enough budget. It's like, well, how do I help you explain to your board how you are spending what you have in the best possible way, the wisest possible way, but the risk is still not where you want it to be. You want to do more. How do I help you balance all that out? So with CISOs, it is about, like, when bad stuff happens, are they going to get chastised and fired? You know, and is all this terrible stuff happen? Or is somebody going to say, we did the best job we could and we accepted all this risk? You know, there is a consequence, but we accepted the risk together, knowingly, thoughtfully, and bad stuff happened. You know, that's, and most CISOs aren't in that position. They feel vulnerable because they don't know if they've assessed the risk thoughtfully. If they don't know if they can express to their leaders that they've expressed the risk thoughtfully and measured and accurately.
And how do you do that through story? Do you do it because you clearly don't want to go for the pain?
Yeah, so
the threat.
Yeah, so I was with McAfee for a while. So with McAfee, we would help the CISOs quantify how much coverage they had. You know, there's always a problem when people buy software, they leave it on the shelf, they don't deploy it. I could tell some horrendous stories about customers who've been hit by malware and viruses. And when we do the investigation, it's, well, yes, you bought our stuff, but you didn't install it on these computers, and that's where you got hit. And that's a no-win solution for a vendor to say, well, you didn't use my stuff. You know, that doesn't make the customer feel any better about you.
Right.
So I would work with the CISOs, and McAfee did a very big thing in the 2000s to help quantify coverage, to say, like, you've got 80% coverage, that's 20% not covered. That's an expression of risk. And risk is part of business. We all know this, that, you know, you could accept risk. It's legitimate. It's when you don't know you accepted risk. That's the problem. So helping the CISOs quantify what they have with every product is like, how is the buyer, how is this person I'm trying to sell it to going to measure my effectiveness, my value, how much they're using, whether it's doing anything useful? Bringing that up front and saying to the CISO, you know, I have all this stuff worked out. You won't have to work out how to express value, because I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm going to show you how to demonstrate how much coverage you have, how much protection you have, how effective the system's working, whether it's on or off, all these basics, like getting that up front. So the CISO isn't, otherwise they will stop listening to what you're telling them, and they'll be thinking, well, how am I going to measure this? Like, how will I know if it's working? How am I going to tell my boss about this? They're thinking about questions, not listening to you anymore. So to get that up front about, you know, what is your problem? Let me understand it. I think these are things you should care about. Is this correct? And then demonstrating value.
Yeah. And I sold security for quite a while. And what I always found was you got to stay away from certain keywords because they've covered keywords already.
Yeah.
That's what makes it a keyword, is that people already know what it means.
Yes. Yeah. Don't oversimplify. I mean, and that comes from discovery, as we would call it. That comes from listening and asking questions to understand the sophistication of your audience, and then not going in. I mean, this is like, I still see people coming in with PowerPoint decks, and it's like, oh, just give me a whiteboard. Give me the ability to ask questions in a whiteboard. But how many sales training programs actually teach a sales guy how to go up to a whiteboard and, like, do an architectural diagram or a roadmap? And because when you're drawing it, you're telling a story. When you're presenting it, you don't know where somebody's concentration is. Yeah. So,
well, you know, because a sales rep's world is their product.
Yeah.
A CTO sees the world much broader. They see how their product fits into the world. So you'd be very good at the whiteboard.
You don't think the sales guy should be able to tell the overall?
Of course they should.
Yeah.
But
so how do we help them do that? Like, how do we?
Yeah, you have to explain what an enterprise looks like.
Yeah. I've seen so many salespeople, like, I've drawn the bubbles on the whiteboard, and then the next meeting I've seen a sales guy stand up and do exactly the same diagram.
It's good.
They're the good ones. And I remember actually that sales guy was drawing, and I knew he was running out of steam on his bubbles. And he said, but you don't want to hear from me. Let me bring up Simon. He knew exactly when to like pivot and get himself out of the hole he was digging for himself. And it was just, it was beautiful because the customer was engaged and thoughtful and saw us as a team. Yeah. So how do we get out of PowerPoint sales training into story sales training?
Yeah, you got to, I did it through analogy.
Yeah.
Because I sold a web service firewall, and web services were just new. This is a long time ago.
Okay.
And people assumed that they had Barracuda and 15 other firewalls all set. Brian, thanks for coming in.
But I've got this.
Yeah, we got this. But things have changed. Now you're exposing an API externally.
Yeah.
It's not just denial of service attacks and stuff.
Well, this comes into where's the dollar coming from? Like I see a lot of people entering the sales force not intrinsically understanding that there's a fixed amount of dollars and they're already spent. If you want one of those dollars, you've got to take it from somewhere else. So
that's a myth, I think.
You think?
Well, come on. If you're selling to Apple, there's 200 billion in the bank. That's not allocated. Yes, it's
okay.
Count,
yeah.
Right. The money is cheap. It's not easy.
Okay. With Apple, maybe. Yeah.
Well,
or with that tier, that enterprise class tier, you're right.
But even if you're selling $100K, $1 million, most of how much money they have before you go in, and it is allocated. You're right. So it's harder to get. It's just that it does exist.
Okay.
Because
I might be jaded in the cybersecurity space where people have these very fixed dollar amounts.
It's fixed until something changes.
Until something happens.
Yeah. And it's very loose.
Yes. Yeah. I was privileged. I had an encryption company just as all the data protection regulations were coming in. We solved the problem of what happens if someone steals your laptop. And all of a sudden, all these data protection rules were coming in. And I don't want to say we were ambulance chasing, but as soon as there was a data breach, the phone would ring, like, how can you help me? And then it was, there was always budget when that happened.
Yeah. I mean, I covered, accounts, and all of a sudden, Desert Storm breaks out. Yep. And sales cycles went from 6 months to 6 hours. It was just, right? Because priority, and that's an extreme, but a budget is always like, I'm busy. Everyone's always busy.
That's true. That's, apathy is your biggest competitor. Yeah.
And what did you like about being in front of a client?
Getting access to the truth. That's actually the terrible way of expressing it, but there's always paraphrasing when it comes through. Deal post-mortem is just a nightmare. Like getting to the truth of why did we lose this deal. I've had the privilege to work with sales guys who would just say, I didn't call the customer enough, I didn't express value. And I've had the disappointment to work with ones who misled me into a feature fest that never resulted in anything. When you get out there, that's like, I love end of quarter. I love technology, but I love seeing people buy it even more. So getting access to the truth, and not even the words people say, but the meaning behind them, looking them in the eye and hearing them say, if that button was blue, I would have bought it. When what they mean is, I have no budget and interest in what you're doing. Getting that quality of information. And also, I love seeing the salespeople be successful. I don't know what it is. It's some perverse joy I get from seeing somebody who is so disadvantaged from a financial point of view. They get paid almost nothing, and everything is on the risk of commission. Seeing them succeed is just joyful. I love to see that happen, and I love to be part of helping them achieve that. I don't know why, but I just, those people, the sales teams take so much risk, and when you've supported them sufficiently that they win, it's just just a great celebration. I love being out in the field.
And I got to imagine that you also learned about how people really value what you do.
Yeah.
And what they value about it.
Which can be very different to what you think. I mean, the encryption product, again, I thought people valued the strength of the encryption, the quality, the algorithms, the feeds and speeds. it turned out that all they valued was the little certificate that said when Brian's laptop was lost, it was encrypted. That's all they cared about,
Right.
nothing else. And to hear a customer say that was like, that's interesting. And then to hear a second customer say that, wow, that's really interesting. And then to ask the salespeople, do people care what algorithm we use? No, it's just a tick box. Like, well, let's defocus on that when we talk about our product and talk about, you know, the confidence that you have in the presence of encryption for the audit that you may be subject to. So that coming back, as you say, to listening, understanding what is their motivation, and then pitching the right message. The feeds and speeds are still important. They're still vitally important, but you don't necessarily lead with them.
And did you find salespeople just miss what the customer really needs because they're so blinded by what they want?
There's some sales guys, yeah. Some cannot get out of going through the feeds and speeds, and when they see the customer's eyes glazing, and I'll discount some, and I don't think they're successful in the long term in enterprise sales.
Yeah.
The ones who do that often are sometimes victims of poor sales enablement programs, which, as you say, so marketing is a sales function. Like, I feel I have to sell the message, the story to marketing, because if they don't have a story, they'll start putting tables of feeds and bullets. But if you give them the stories, they embrace the stories. So it's a vicious circle from the technology side and the product side of the business to enable the sales side with more than just bullet points. Yes, many of the sales team, they will adopt a better practice if they're given the information, given the support to do so.
And did you ever find a salesperson kind of interrogating you in the car to and from the accounts, trying to get every little nugget out of you?
Like, why does that matter? That's always the question. Like, why does this feature matter? One company I had, we actually produced release notes in the language of sales. So we talked about the value of that feature. Customer really wanted the feed and speed of it, but the sales guy wanted, like, why did we bother doing that? Like, why should I care? And if I couldn't tell you why you should care, then maybe we shouldn't talk about that piece at all. Maybe it's nobody cares. But yeah, the interrogations in the planes and in the cars and road trips. I mean, this is why we started. We would do crazy things like hire a minivan. We would drive around for 4 days, because that time in the car talking about what messages resonated, what features actually did, what products really, what value they created for the customer, it was invaluable. And those sales teams would come out with stories and anecdotes and ways of expressing the value far better than the marketing and the sales enablement could achieve.
Yeah. Because when I did get to work with VP of engineering or CTO, I always wanted deep understanding of how we were different.
Yeah.
Tell me every competitor's weakest points and how do we cut them off at the ankles?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be able to do that.
There is this, I mean, you know this, there's these two schools of thought. Is, do you focus on the competitors or do you focus on yourself? I think you need to find a hybrid in the middle. You can't be blind to the competitor, but you don't want to end up in a feature bake-off either.
You don't, but like, I was never working for the big companies. I was working for the scrappy little upstarts, and then they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, we're going to go with Oracle, HP, and them." And so you had to wedge yourself in.
Yeah, and they were doing that because it's easy. I mean, they always say no one got fired for renewing their Cisco firewall.
Well, that's it. If you're
it's easy.
An Oracle shop and they come out with something, you know it's not as good, but I need to know why.
Yeah.
And how does that impact?
Yeah, I was competing against Microsoft, you know, and one of my board members said to me, if you're scared of Microsoft, get out of the software industry. I mean, they could do anything. They could do anything. The question is, will they choose to do something? Yeah. Will they choose to enter your space in anger? Right. And they entered my space eventually, but they dipped one toe in and it was horrendous. So, and as you say, we would analyze their offering and go to the customers and say, well, Microsoft have a great solution. It's perfect, but it's not right for you because of these reasons. Microsoft is doing things for the average Joe Schmo customer who not sophisticated, etc. But because I understand your business better, because we have done that exploration and I understand you better, I think I'm better for you because of these reasons.
Well, you did that so smoothly. How'd you learn that? Because they don't
Oh,
teach
it's
you
just
that in engineering
no,
school.
no. We're being out there with the field.
Yeah.
There are engineers who the best thing for them is put them in a dark cupboard, feed
Right.
them,
Feed
leave them.
pizza,
Don't
like
don't
mushrooms.
don't interrupt them. Like let them create magic, because software development is art. I mean, we like to think of it as science, but it's not. It's art. It's never finished. You just choose to stop at some point. There are others who really want to understand what the customer, what the motivation, what the business is doing. The challenge is, how do you feed them enough information to be helpful without distracting them too much? And the usual thing is, like, people become developers, they become chief technology officers, then they get out and talk to customers, they become evangelists. At every stage, you start refining your understanding of the business and what it means to be a good business. And it's sometimes heartbreaking to see startups founded by highly technical people building products, and they're saying, well, we'll worry about market fit later. We'll worry about customer. It's like, how do you even know what you're building? Like, how are you not customer first? Like, how are you not out there asking your customers, does this solve a useful problem for you? Is this the beginning of a long strategic relationship with you? So yeah, it's getting out there and talking to people, and understanding the motivation. I mean, we started by, the sales guy's motivation is to meet his number. We didn't talk about portfolio sales. I mean, you were probably deeply into having a vast portfolio of products to sell. And as a technologist, how do I get a sales guy to even pay attention to my part of that portfolio? Because a sales guy will rightfully sell what's easiest or what's lowest risk to their credibility and what will help them make their number. Getting a salesperson to take a risk on a brand new product, even though we all understand revenue diversification is so important, getting a sales guy to think, well, I'll potentially burn my relationship with the customer because of this brand new thing that Simon just invented. That's a big stretch.
It's huge.
So to earn the right for the sales guy to pay attention to you, or rather, you have to earn the right. That salesperson or that sales leadership team have to be confident that you will be there for them, back them up, support, that you will not burn them. Otherwise, they will not take it on.
Last question, and I gotta believe that salespeople brought you in to certain accounts, hoping that you would be the silver bullet, meaning that the client's not getting it.
Yeah.
And how did you handle that situation where you're kind of put in there? The customer's really not bought into it. The salesperson did whatever to get you in there.
Yeah.
And put it all on your back.
Yeah. So when it works, it's because I've managed to say to the sales guy, like, I need to know exactly what's going on. Like, who's in the room? What are their motivations? What is their tone? Like, are they favorable to us? Like, you got to be honest, and we've got to talk this through. Like, to the prep. Like, what are the words I shouldn't say? I had the misfortune to be in Yahoo's boardroom when one of my salespeople said, "Oh, you can just Google that." Like, I'd never been marched out of a building so fast. Yeah. I've also been in the car park of Dell with a HP laptop in my hand, thinking, I'm not going to bring this in the building. Like, I'll leave it in the car and I'll get a notebook, a notepad, like paper. Thoughtfulness, strategy. So when you're trying to rescue a relationship, like, you got to go in as a team. You've got to be transparent. When it hasn't worked is when I've gone in and been blindsided by something because the sales guy was a little embarrassed. Sales guys like made a promise that we couldn't keep, but I could have planned for that in advance. I could have had some clever apology or expectation. So yeah, going in as a silver bullet is a tremendous responsibility. I think some people don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
But it is, like, when the customer relationship is at risk, you've got to prep it. You've got to talk it through. You've got to be transparent, have a game plan, best face, be humble. I've had the misfortune. McAfee, I don't know if you remember, we took down like 50 million computers worldwide with a bad update. 5958. David DeWalt also often talks about 5958. We took down Burger King drive-throughs worldwide, which I thought was a public service, but they didn't think so.
They didn't look at it that way.
No. Straight into executive room strategy, called all the customers. We will stand behind you. We will make this right. We are there. Anything you need, let us know. Like humble pie, but rightfully, we were humble. We were apologetic. It was genuine, and came out of it with many stronger relationships, even though we'd caused all this disruption. Customers knew that if we messed up, we would stand by them. So prep, honesty, transparency, plan, understand what you're going to do, and then go in the meeting and do your best, and hopefully the customer's rational about it.
Great. Hey, Simon, really appreciate your time today. Where can people
Pleasure.
go to connect and follow you?
LinkedIn, Simon Hunt, CTO. You'll find me there. Join me on the fight against cybercrime. I'd love to see you with me.